there, I'm Subha, a career growth coach, and this is season 5 of Small Talk with RainKraft with.
I'm Hasita. I'm a marketing consultant at Motley Crue, and I'm so excited. Are we at season 5 already?
Can you believe it? Please do look us up and catch earlier episodes too. But let's get on with this one. So, what are you working on lately, Hasita?
What am I not working on, Subha? But yeah, just now I think I had a very interesting call with an AI/ML client that we're working with. We've been with them for quite some time. And this has been an interesting year for their industry. Suddenly, ChatGPT came on board, captured everyone's imagination. And I think everyone is feeling the pressure of having to invent something and not always knowing what is the right thing to invent. And that problem is playing out in some very interesting ways, I must say, because we have now decided, or rather, somebody has decided at some point in the system, that there exists a need for a proof of concept. And the funny thing is, we don't know what proof of what concept, right? The finance team is already making projections and forecasts. The sales team is already selling something, I'm presuming, because the marketing team is being asked to sell a product that doesn't exist.
Wow. And it's funny that you brought up the context of an AI ML client, because I just finished a call with another prospective client, again in a high-tech space. And the story I heard is very similar, that I need to create new stuff and I've got my teams working in silos.
Oh, that's interesting that the word silos got used, because here we are a very geographically diverse team. In India itself, we are spread across 3 locations. And every time I feel like we've made some progress. And then a week later, we hear feedback too high level. It's not working for us. And the problem is, in the 1 week since we've last spoken, a lot has changed, which we have no visibility into.
I think this problem is very real across organizations. And more I have leaders, founders reaching out saying, how do I break these silos? I've hired the best. I've got really good folks leading various teams, but they all are on this journey of their own, on a trip of their own. It's not a question of lack of intent or lack of putting in the effort, but one whose onus is it to bring it all together.
In fact, I would like to bring it back to a slightly more complex question, which is, how do you spot the silo? Right? To break it, I need to know this is what it looks like. Right. So typically, in your experience, what does a silo even look like in an organization?
Like your case of POC is a perfect example to use, because here somebody heard the client say, so you have an idea, can we see what it looks like? And I'm sure that was how simply they put it. Somebody in the room jumped and said, yeah, we'll show you a POC. We'll show you a proof of concept, which is something in his or her mind. Client is still saying, show me something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they've come back and they've used this big word now. They've thrown it in the meeting, saying we need to have a POC in 3 days. Now, why did the 3 days come? Because this person wants to close the deal.
Yeah. Case of conflicting priorities, right? Like deal closure, which is a big key metric for the sales team, versus the product team is now sitting and saying, I don't even have a vision in my head for what I'm building. Like a POC for what?
Correct.
Right?
I don't know enough. I don't know what will please this client of yours.
Yeah. And honestly, what have you pitched to the client in the first place? What unicorn dream have you promised?
So that the person who shouted out, I'll give you a POC, if they could just take a minute to say, what do I want to show the client? What are they looking for at this stage? POC is just a name, but maybe they just want to know or get comfort in the fact that we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Or we've done something like this before, or we can come up with something new and different because they know that we do great stuff. I'm just taking an agency example, like we do great stuff when it comes to social, but can these guys also write well?
Yeah.
Right? So they want to see some variety of the work that you can do, but somebody has now shouted POC.
And it's quite akin to digging your own grave, because the idea behind a POC is very different from a pitch deck.
Because when you've said something like that, you've essentially I'm giving you a close to finished product
in 3 days. Yeah.
And so when they come back, they meet with all sorts of resistance, and the leader or the founder is hearing each silo shout out why it can't be done or what they need for it to get done. Like, I need 3 more people, I need X dollars. And now they come and they say, hey, I've got too many silos.
And interestingly, therein itself, you begin asking the wrong question, right? The immediate response to that in most boardrooms, I'm sure, including the ones that we've been part of. And if I ran it, I'm sure it would be the same thing as well. We start asking, okay, what do you need to make this happen in 3 days?
Yeah.
Which is probably the wrong question. Right?
Because nobody has said, hey, what do we want to do for this client at this stage? Right? What all can that look like?
Right.
I think that's the important question, that it can look like many things. So there are some which are readily available, some which we can take 3 days and make, and some which are we need to buy more time. And some which, and correct me if I'm wrong, where the cost of losing that one lead is probably worth the gain you have in terms of the clarity of asking that question. Right? Sure, this client, you said a POC, you show them a 2-minute video, it may not work, but at least you know what you can and cannot deliver. And just the value of having had that conversation and realize it's not working. No, in my banking days, and since I was in operations, this whole silo bit really used to play out so much. And as ops folks, our only dream and desire was that the sales guy didn't promise something that doesn't exist today, that we can't deliver. And that very standard joke of promising an ATM and then putting a guy behind it spends cash. The number of manual processes and the number of manual processes we've set up just because somebody in their silo thought it's a good idea to say yes to something or to promise something, to not even say, let me check and come back. So my key takeaway from this segment is that if we knew each other in a past life, we would have hated each other. I get that. But really, as a organization, I think the larger you become, and everybody wants, that's the whole point, right? You want to grow. If you're attuned to that, see, sales is always going to promise the moon and stars. Finance is always going to count the pennies. Ops is always going to have to worry about delivery. How do you begin to develop a common vision around what can be done, and preferably do it as quickly as possible? I think some organizations try to do that by creating those roles. That there's that one person who's that project manager, aggregator, who's bringing people into the room, trying to manage them. And then there are others who say, okay, if we put these people in a room, they'll find the best way. Yeah. Right. And that's what I think most organizations tend to do. That, okay, let's have this kind of cross-functional meeting, and where each one is still looking out for their own agenda. But somebody has to take ownership, take accountability, and say, listen, maybe it's in most cases the person who has promised something to the client. It is on you, because you also have to face the client 3 days later, to say, hey, this is the big picture. The client just wants comfort that we're good at this. Or the client has seen something already which is really good, and hence we do actually need to give a payment. Because we are competing with XYZ. They have a product ready, but I'm trying to make inroads here. And so I do need to showcase that, not just that we have capabilities and can rise to the challenge, actually have something. Which in a high-tech context, I think it's not optional, right? Like the pace at which things are happening today, you better figure it out as quickly as possible. Yeah. But it's interesting to just be able to ask that question. I think in most contexts, probably that hurry doesn't exist. It's the hurry is a manufactured construct of the system. We can think about what creates these silos. One is the general nature of the organization. Like what you said, hurry. It's interesting where if you're always in a state of rush, then people have always, or they feel the pressure to promise something, to say 3 days instead of can we have 5, and then come back and try and reverse engineer the whole. And the silos get stronger because everyone's getting defensive. Or honestly, if hurry is what you want, then you communicate that. It's okay to be in that space, in that market, in that industry at that point in time, but just accept that it comes at the cost of something else. The silos are very real, and they can really take away from a lot of good work that can happen. And it's quite an interesting complexity, because in the client use case that I'm working with, the head of marketing is actually a very restrained individual. And I respect that a lot, because in that ecosystem, to say, no, I need time to think is quite, I can only imagine how much anxiety that must be causing him. But also that person exists who's going against the grain and saying,
at this point, literally what we are selling is a Canva creative, guys. Please chill, right?
Yeah. No, I think there's another firm that I work with and have worked with in the past. And if you look at, okay, what's the bigger picture? You're really trying to, as a group, create really strong learning and development programs, training interventions, and reach a space with the client where if they do a pilot of 20 people, then they want to repeat that for the 1,000 people that they have.
Right.
So if you could see that bigger picture and then take it back to the various teams, it would serve them so much better, because otherwise each silo is just bent upon achieving one thing.
Yeah. And which are all contributing, but not to the thing that you want them to contribute towards. Yeah. And there's a great disadvantage to that, right? Because every team feels like they've done so much, but the end result is just not visible. Like I've seen in this case, the finance guy in the company, he has already burned some bridges with procurement and others in the bigger organization without the vision that, hey, this was just batch one and we could do 100 batches. Yeah. If I keep that in mind, let me tolerate these early inconveniences and build a relationship. Yeah. Because again, you've not seen that, or at least I think also sometimes nobody has shown you that. And I think as leaders and founders, some of the things that we talk about, which is, do you have a vision? Do you have these things seem so abstract, but this is what we are asking for. It's just one statement to unify, hey, what's our end goal here? Yeah. Right? So if someone could say, hey, our end goal is we deliver a really good program that they want to replicate. And for us, that makes sense because the program is done and ready. So the incremental effort is also lower. Yeah. Right. So the project management team knows that. And so they work well with the external team of facilitators and content creators and marketing folks. And everybody is aligned on that. And I think in the leader's position, in cases where this has worked and everyone has had that unified vision, somewhat rare, but exists, the leader themselves is very cognizant of the fact that this particular vision is coming at the cost of 4 others, and they're willing to make that trade. So what do you have to say, Subha, to someone who, is in a leadership capacity and needs to bring that unification into the picture, right? Whether it's to build a product, whether it's to take a chance on X versus Y, whether it's to invest upfront a certain amount of capital in exchange for something. How do you go about making these decisions? I think there's 2 parts to it. One, which we've been talking about, that if you're the person in the room who can give the group the big picture, then please open your mouth and do. I think that's very important. Like, you don't have to be the CEO, the leader, the founder, but it's maybe something that you've brought to the table and it's a project you're running and the outcome matters to you. Call out that vision and ask, like, are you clear on why we're doing it this way? Are you clear on your role in this? Do you have any questions to ask? Do you know why, as I'm asking procurement to bill this at a 20% discount because there is hope of XYZ? Whatever that may be, I think that if you have the opportunity to be that unifying force, then please embrace that role. I was, let me just say, overhearing a conversation today, and it was really about trying to give a sales team an incentive for, let's say, the last quarter of the year. And we had someone and so it's already been decided that you're going to give a certain incentive. And then there was finance saying, oh, it will take me 2 days to issue that PO and raise this work order, etc. There was somebody in marketing saying, but if we run this scheme, this will happen, that will happen, etc., etc. Then there was somebody in HR saying, how do we make sure A is included and B is not and C is this? And finally, one voice had to say, listen, if we're going to give a sales incentive, once we promised it, it has to go out, because otherwise there's no point in promising something and then taking 2 weeks to iron out the details where everybody's lost any momentum, joy that they had. Yeah. Second, keep it simple. Don't complicate it so much that everybody has to read the fine print to qualify. Yeah. Right? Which I thought was very interesting is that make sure that people can win it. Running the program is not the end goal, right? It's inspiring people. Correct. So it's making sure that they feel happy to put in a few extra hours and reach slightly elevated targets and benefit themselves and the business and feel good about it. Yeah. And that's the end goal. So the
end goal is not to say I ran an incentive and only 20% of them were good enough and then I saved 80% of the budget.
See, but there's a very real possibility to look at it that way.
It is, no?
Depending on which department you're from.
Because you saved 80% of the budget and 4 people quit and now you're sitting and hiring.
Yeah, but that's a different department's problem. I saved 80%. Yeah.
So I think one is that unifying voice. If it's your voice, then please use it. The second aspect, and so once you have that vision, outcome, everything articulated, it's then how do you empower people to take that and how are you giving them the time and space? How are you letting them voice even a dissenting view that, hey, this can't be done in 3 days. By now, the vision that you stated is not that we have to have a POC in 3 days. We need to go back to the client with something that will
reassure them that
to take us to the next round of decision making.
Absolutely. And that's a much simpler problem to solve.
So somebody may say, hey, we already have done this for XYZ. I can put together a video. I can put together a demo.
And then everyone can just forget about the POC, right?
Yeah. So I think empowering them is another crucial piece. And keep checking with, do you know what you guys need to do? Do you know what you guys need to contribute to this bigger picture? And that piece which we've been talking about is like that organization. What is driving the organization? Right? What kind of peoples are we?
Quite an interesting, because as an organism, it's performing in a certain way. It's not 10 people doing the same thing. It's somehow that one amoeba which is behaving in very similar patterns. And here, in fact, in this example, also I can see that there is a lot of be perfect, perhaps, and not a lot of get things done, right? And because of that, there's a certain inherent value that's been attached to thinking. You might be articulating it as, hey guys, we need to move quickly. But no one's moving quickly because that's not the organism.
Yeah, because anywhere when you want perfection, you need time.
Yeah.
Because you need to iterate multiple times and you need to feel that you've reached the end state that you want, and that can't happen in 3 days. There are some organizations and you feel like they are...
To be in a hurry, to be busy, I think is also something we value a lot.
I could have promised you 3 days. I promised you 2.5. It actually happened to me 2 days ago. Somebody came with a requirement and I need to work on it for them. And then I assumed that they need it very quickly. Okay.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of what I was working on, I assumed that they need that very quickly. And I spent all of... Actually, I put aside some other things. I worked on it all of yesterday. And then when I had a conversation with the person in the evening, he said, I'm just catching a flight to the US. I'll reach on Wednesday. Shall we catch up on Thursday?
I'm like, but I prepared yesterday. I had no idea.
But I think we both noticed there's a huge component saying, are we happy doing it?
Yeah, very big. Yeah.
And it has helped them say no to certain projects, which would have messed with that
equilibrium, right? Yeah.
And I think they're better off for it.
They definitely are.
So understanding your own DNA a bit, what kind of organization are we? Is that working for us? Is that serving us well? Have we created this culture of everything should be ready yesterday? And we don't need to.
Consciously, you might be saying, this is what I want.
Yeah.
But then this is who I am, right? Dichotomy does exist in quite a few.
It works the other way also. When over a sustained period, if you demand everything as of yesterday, then I don't know, I feel as a team member, I'll say, okay, tomorrow something else will come up which was wanted as of yesterday. So let me just chill. Because knowing what kind of culture you have created or are part of, what kind of work style that you like or enjoy, how is that working, goes a long way in trying to break some of these silos. Because if I'm leading a team where we're always trying to beat a deadline, but I need to now collaborate with another team where, because of the nature of their work, they have to get it. It's not perfection for the sake of perfection, but it matters. So knowing that, okay, this is when we work together, the silos can break when I can articulate my vision, why I need it, quickly. Not as of yesterday, but at least 2 days from now. How can we have a conversation to say, what can you do best in that time frame? And then agree on that. I think there are, if we try and summarize now, there's some clear stages in this. One is somebody has a need, right? And they're coming back to the larger group and saying, hey, these 5 teams, we now have to fulfill this need. And this is why we're doing it. This is the vision. This is the outcome I'm hoping for. So really being the voice that articulates it. And then checking in on each team saying, for us to achieve this, what do you need?
Yeah.
Because you as a group may function differently and your priorities, the way you work, the way you need to work may be slightly different. So what do you need? And hence as a group, what can we agree on?
Yeah.
Right? Because once you've agreed, then I think most people would then tend towards sticking to whatever they've committed to.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what can we agree on that? Okay, in 3 days' time, we're going to stop calling it a POC first of all, but this is what we're going to have ready for the client because we want to give them comfort.
And I think one of the key points that I'm also picking up on is don't wait for somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
If the lack of communication is affecting your everyday work or just how you feel about the work that you're doing, then speak up. Take charge, at least in the locus that you can control. And
something that we both like to hear about is that giving people time to also do other things.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a well-known Google story, but that concept of giving an employee 20% of their time to do other things, I feel it gives you a lot of clarity on what you want to be doing in the 80%
that you're here. Yeah.
Right? How you want to do it, what you want to do, how important that is to you and the organization, and just gives you more awareness about your way of working, why something could be important to someone else. Like in that 20%, I'm also interacting with another group, I'm seeing what they're doing, etc. It gives me a lot of insight into how I need to name some of my commitments and
expectations as well. So essentially, if someone says, I needed this yesterday, ask why.
Yeah.
And then with all the time that you've therefore freed up, do something worthwhile.
Yeah. No, I think silos are a big organizational challenge.
Yeah.
They really take away a lot of energy because you're simply creating conflict zones. You're not creating productive outcomes. But any effort at chipping away at those silos, I think, gives huge benefit to the group as a whole.
The energy itself.
Yeah. It does become a lot more positive and productive, Manav, of course. So try that and let us know if you were able to break some of those little mountains or hills, whatever size they may be. See you guys next time. Bye. Please do remember to share, subscribe, follow, and do leave us a nice rating or review. It really helps us move up the charts and reach more and more small talkers. Bye.